How do you govern 12 million people without writing a single word? Not on paper, not on stone, not in books. Instead, you tie knots into pieces of string.
It sounds impossible. But 500 years ago, that is exactly what the Inca Empire did.
To the Spanish conquistadors, these knotted cords looked primitive, almost meaningless. But they were looking at something far more sophisticated than a counting tool.
They were looking at the information system of an empire.
At its peak, the Inca Empire, its territory included parts of modern-day Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina.
The exact population is debated, but many estimates place it somewhere between 10 and 12 million people. These communities lived across some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. Yet the Inca built roads across this landscape, connected distant settlements, constructed agricultural terraces, and maintained state storehouses filled with food and supplies. They built Machu Picchu. They organized armies. They moved laborers across great distances. They managed agricultural production in environments where a single failed harvest could threaten entire regions. This was not a small chiefdom held together by personal loyalty. It was a complex state. And complex states have a problem: information. A government must track people, land, crops, animals, labor, military supplies, and obligations.
Human memory can manage a village. It cannot manage millions of people spread across a continent.
That is why the arrival of the Spanish created such a misunderstanding.
The conquistadors came from a world where government records were written in books, ledgers, and legal documents. They expected to find libraries, archives, and shelves filled with official records. Instead, they found almost nothing that looked like writing to them. No alphabet, no paper archive, no familiar system of written government documents. So some Europeans concluded that the Inca state was less organized than it appeared. Perhaps it was ruled mainly through force. Perhaps local chiefs were acting independently. Perhaps the empire had built impressive monuments without developing a real administrative system. But the evidence told a different story.
The Inca state required communities to provide labor rather than simply paying money taxes. That labor built roads, maintained terraces, transported goods, and served the army.
The government maintained storehouses across the empire. These reserves could support soldiers, workers, and communities during shortages.
Officials needed to know what was stored, where it was stored, and who was responsible for it. Some Spanish accounts even describe conquistadors watching Inca officials use knotted cords to record the contents of storehouses while the Spanish were actively looting them. That detail is important. The system was not ceremonial. It was being used in real time, during a crisis, to track resources. The Spanish had mistaken the absence of familiar writing for the absence of information. But the Inca had not ignored the administrative challenge. They had solved it, using a different technology. The first clue was the quipu.
A quipu, also written as quipu, was made from a main cord with many smaller cords attached to it. These cords could be made from cotton, llama wool, or alpaca fiber. They could vary in color, thickness, twist, and arrangement. And along them were knots, not random knots, deliberate knots placed at deliberate distances in deliberate forms.
At first, many historians believed the quipu was simply an accounting tool, an abacus made from string. That interpretation was not completely wrong, but it was incomplete, because bookkeeping alone does not explain how the Inca governed an empire. A number is only useful if you know what it represents. A cord might tell you that the number is 4,782. But 4,782 what? People? Bags of maize? Llamas? Days of labor? Weapons? The real mystery was not whether the quipu recorded numbers. It clearly did. The mystery was whether the chords also preserved meaning beyond the numbers.
Were the Inca using the wrong kind of writing, or had historians been looking for writing in the wrong form? To answer that question, we need to understand how the knots worked.
The word quipu comes from Quechua and means knot. Visually, a quipu does not resemble a book. There are no pages, sentences, or familiar symbols. There are only chords and knots. But the simplicity is deceptive. Every part of the object could be controlled.
The position of a knot mattered. Its shape mattered. The number of turns mattered. The color and material of the cord could matter. Even the way the cord was twisted or attached could carry information.
In the 1920s, the scholar L. Leland Locke demonstrated that many quipus used a base 10 decimal system. The arrangement is similar to the place value system we use today.
Knots near the end of a chord could represent units. Knots farther up could represent tens, then hundreds, then thousands.
A long knot with several turns could represent numbers from 2 to 9. A distinctive figure-8 knot could represent 1. And an empty position could represent the absence of a value, a function similar to 0 in a place value system. This meant that a trained administrator could read a string of knot remarkable precision.
The quipu could record population counts, labor obligations, harvests, tribute, millet inventories. Some chords also appear to have functioned as totalizers.
They could summarize the information recorded on a group of smaller chords. A single quipu could contain the population data of an entire province, tens of thousands of people.
In the modern world, we'd call that a database. The Inca carried it in one hand.
The system was not just recording isolated numbers. It was organizing numbers into levels: village, district, province, empire. This is the kind of structure a large government needs.
But numbers do not explain themselves. A number only becomes information when it is connected to meaning.
This is where the quipu becomes much more mysterious. The chords were not identical. Some were red, others blue, yellow, green, brown, or white.
They could be made from different fibers. They could be spun and twisted in different directions.
Some chords were attached in different ways. Some had subsidiary chords branching from them. These features may have helped identify categories or relationships. A red cord might have represented one kind of resource. A particular fiber might have indicated a specific type of record. A twist direction might have created another layer of distinction. We do not know the full code, and that uncertainty matters. It is tempting to describe the quipu as a completely deciphered written language. It is not. Researchers can confidently identify its numerical structure, but the broader symbolic system remains only partially understood. One influential theory, associated with the scholar Gary Urton, suggests that quipus may have encoded information through a series of binary choices.
These choices could include features such as the direction of a twist, the type of fiber, the color, or the way a chord was attached.
If several binary decisions were combined with multiple colors, the number of possible information units could become very large.
In theory, such a system could produce more than 1,500 distinct combinations. That would make the quipu far more than a simple calculator. It would be a physical information code. But a theory is not the same as a translation. We cannot yet read a quipu the way we read a letter or a paragraph.
Many surviving quipus lack the oral explanations that once accompanied them. And that may be the key. The quipu was probably never designed to work alone. It may have been a record that depended on trained people who knew what the chords represented. In other words, the knowledge was divided between the object and the person interpreting it. This is difficult for modern viewers to imagine, because we are used to documents being self-contained. A government report can be stored on a server, A spreadsheet can be opened years later. A written law can be read by someone who never met its author. The Inca system may have worked differently. The quipu preserved structure. The administrator preserved context. Together, they created a record. A quipu was not like a book. It was closer to software. By itself, it did nothing. A quipu without a trained interpreter was like a database without software. But when interpreted by trained specialists inside a functioning administrative network, it became one component of an operating system that governed an empire. The people who managed these records were known as quipucamayocs, keepers of the knots. They were not ordinary clerks. They required specialized training. They had to understand the numerical structure of the chords, the categories being recorded, and the administrative system behind them. Some chroniclers claimed that skilled quipucamayocs could interpret quipus with extraordinary speed, even with their eyes closed. Whether every detail of those accounts is accurate, they reveal how Europeans understood the quipucamayocs as professional information specialists. Their job was not simply to count. They had to connect the numbers to the real world. A population figure had to be connected to a particular settlement. A labor obligation had to be connected to a specific community.
A storehouse inventory had to be connected to a location, a date, and a responsible official. The quipu recorded the structure. The quipucamayoc supplied the meaning.
But knowledge is useless if it cannot travel. The Inca understood that as well. Their road network crossed mountains and valleys. Estimates vary, but the roads and pathways may have extended for tens of thousands of kilometers. Along these routes were relay stations, and running between them were the chasquis. The chasquis were trained messengers who carried knowledge from one station to the next. Rather than sending one runner across the entire empire, the Inca used a relay system. Each runner covered a shorter distance, then handed the message to another runner. This was faster and more reliable than expecting one person to travel hundreds of kilometers alone. Some accounts describe messages traveling more than 240 kilometers in a single day. Other accounts suggest that information could move from Quito to Cusco in just over a week.
The exact speeds are difficult to verify, but the principle is clear. Relay stations carried messages. Quipus recorded them. Quipucamayocs interpreted them.
Together, these parts formed an invisible operating system. A modern government might use databases, courier networks, telephones, and trained civil servants. A global company might use servers, logistics centers, delivery routes, and employees who know how to interpret the data. The tools are different. The organizational problem is the same.
Knowledge has to be collected, classified, stored, transmitted, and acted upon. The Inca system did all five. This is why the question may be too narrow. It assumes that writing must look like alphabetic text. But writing is only one way to organize knowledge. The Inca developed a system that combined physical records with trained memory and rapid communication. That combination may have been especially effective in their environment. The empire did not need to send documents across oceans. It needed to move knowledge across mountains.
It did not need every farmer to read a government notice. It needed officials who could collect local data and connect it to regional administration.
It did not need a single archive containing every fact. It needed distributed records stored across the empire.
The Inca solved the problem of coordination differently, not because they were less advanced, because their environment demanded a different solution.
The Inca didn't leave us libraries. They left us knots. And somewhere in a museum drawer, a civilization may still be waiting for someone to read what it says.